So I'm Writing a Novel is the show where you join me, Oliver Brackenbury, on the journey of writing my next novel, from first ideas all the way to publication and promotion. In this one-man reality show, I'll share with you my ever-evolving thoughts and feelings on how I write, being a writer, and everything that entails at each stage of the process. I'll also answer listener questions and, sometimes, interview people who write fiction. If you're the kind of person who likes to learn how things are made and get to know the people making them, then this is the show for you. Today I'm interviewing someone who actually doesn't write fiction, so maybe I'm breaking the rules a little bit, but she gave birth to someone who does, so I think that qualifies. Yep, I'm interviewing my mum, Christine Brackenbury, who is quite the creative person herself and has written a book, so I reckon she qualifies. Plus, I don't know, just breaks things up, it's kind of neat. All right, so without further ado, let's talk to my mum. And here I am with Christine Ann Brackenbury, my mum. Hi, Mum.
Hi, Oliver.
It's nice to have you here on a visit. I don't think we've seen each other in person in Toronto since 2019, maybe earlier?
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, well, let's get into it. The serious interview. Mum, I'm curious, what is the earliest time you remember taking joy in creativity?
Taking joy in creativity. Oh, I was one of 5 girls growing up. I was the middle one, so I had these 2 older sisters. One was quite a bit older, and I used to like to draw. I always liked to draw. And I got into doing cartoon figures. And I remember I discovered I could ruin a romance by drawing a cartoon of these poor boys that came to visit the house. And my sisters, who were madly in love with that boy until they saw the big nose I'd drawn or the ear. Oh, I guess his ears do stick out. And that would be the end of the romance. That was my earliest memories of creativity.
I don't think I've heard that one before. And you had 2 younger sisters as well, right?
I had 2 younger sisters, yes. I used to like to tell them scary stories. And we lived in a 3-story old Victorian house. And there was, they used to call the landing up on the 2nd floor, and it was a dark, there was no lights there. And I'd take these 2 little sisters down there, we'd sit on the steps, and I'd make up the story as I went along, really. And they loved it. They just loved it. Cling to my arms. But that night, they'd have the most dreadful nightmares, and then I'd get into a lot of trouble with my parents. I was always getting into trouble. I was only being creative.
So I'm already starting to see where I get some of it. Okay. Well, that's a lovely answer. What is the first time you remember seeing me take joy in creativity? When I was very little, What's the first time you remember seeing me doing something, drawing, telling a story, whatever?
Telling a story.
Anything creative.
You were more about words. And even letters. I remember trying to get you across to the park, across the street, and you kept stopping and pointing at the number plates on cars. And I thought, is he interested in cars? What's going on here? No, I had to say the numbers and the letters. And once I'd done that, then we could go to the park and use the swings and all that stuff. But it was about the letters, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I like that story, but I don't know that I was creating anything. Do you remember the first time you saw me doing, really getting into a drawing or making up a story for my friends or for you?
No, I can't remember that.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me if this is the first time. Maybe this will jog your memory. Do you remember I was probably 4 or 5 and I made up this crazy story about the Earth blowing up and God was a major character and then he ended up reassembling the Earth. But he messed up and he put everybody in China and Canada.
I was going to say China was involved. Yeah, I remember thinking, how does he know about China?
I don't know, it's 4 or 5. I'm sure I heard it sort of book. And he messed up and he put all the Canadians in China and all the Chinese people in Canada. Yeah. But, and this was how you knew a little boy wrote it if the million other clues weren't there. There was a lesson that the likes of which you must have been teaching me because the problem of everybody being put in the wrong country was resolved by everybody saving up their allowance to buy plane tickets. Everyone in China who was in Canada, from China in Canada, saved up their allowances. I don't know who gave it to them to buy tickets back to China and vice versa with the Canadians.
Oh, that's right. And you wanted me to. I think I got it photocopied so that we could give a copy to the library in Carp. And the librarian was very sweet. She knew Oliver from way back because he liked to read lots of books. Oliver was always a favourite at libraries or museums. That's what his happy place. And yes, and she showed him where she was going to put it on the shelf and everything. That was fun.
And many years later, I would be delighted to have a copy of my first novel at the Carp Library, which was in a different building at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I could see your handwriting and my crayon drawings, and
That's
we bound it with staples.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
I know you have a photocopy. I don't know what about the original, but you have a photocopy somewhere in our
Yeah.
family archive in
Yes,
the
yeah.
house at Griffin. Oh dear. Okay, so yeah.
Oh,
that's-
being creative. I just
so do
remembered.
you think that? Oh, okay, go on. Yeah.
You were 18 months old and you were in hospital, and I'm not going to go into great details, but they had to ask you to lie flat for several days, not to disturb the surgery they'd done. And anyway, that was too boring, so they tried tying you down, each arm either side the bed,
Wow.
and then a tremendous stir was created because Oliver figured out how to flip himself over so he could be on his knees because it was too boring laying on his back. And the surgeon was so amused. He said, "Wow," he said, "that's never happened before." And the nurses were really cross because they were embarrassed. They felt that they hadn't done a proper job. And they were Oliver had made them look silly in front of the surgeon. There's always this hierarchy in every organization, of course. Yeah.
I think you might have remembered the first time I was really difficult, but I'll take it.
No, you were being creative. The surgeon was very impressed.
I suppose. Okay, so in England, when you were older, you taught art to grade schoolers, right?
No.
No? Well, I know you were a school teacher, but I thought you taught art class. Amongst
No,
other
I didn't
things.
want to teach art. No,
Really?
Originally I'd wanted to go to art school, but my
Yes.
father didn't approve of art school back then.
Right.
We're talking hippie times, and that he didn't want his daughter mixing with those weirdos.
No.
Even though my high school teachers were desperate for me to continue in my art studies, I'd got the highest grade in exam. Imagine an exam in art, doesn't that sound silly?
Yeah.
When I was 15, an exam that I should have taken when I was 18. So anyway, they were so disappointed, but no, Dad said no. So I said, "How about teaching?" And he said, "Oh, that's good. You earn good money and people will respect you." They don't respect artists. So then my answer to that was to find the very best art department in the teachers' college. So I researched that, and I was so grateful that I was there for 3 years, and marvelous artists were teaching it. And I learnt about sculpting. That was my first introduction to sculpting, and I loved it. And then I thought, I'd hate to teach art to kids who are bored out of their minds. And so I thought, where's the most creative part of school life? And I thought, well, 5 to 7-year-olds. It was called first school back then in England, first school. And then again, they're always changing ideas. The idea was that no child would be labelled in first school. I had double-edged sword, of course.
Now, when you say labelled, do you mean like designated as having this
Hyperactivity or whatever.
Right,
But that was a new thing
this
back
issue
then.
or another? Yeah.
But it meant that it felt that children were very creative at that age, and they say what they want, and they're just wonderful. That's delightful to be around, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay, well, I don't know. I always, for some reason, I guess I conflated things in my head and thought you taught art class, or amongst others. But
Yeah.
so you kind of answered this, but I guess you did consider then being an artist as your vocation before Granddad.
I don't really think I
guided
thought
you
it through.
elsewhere.
It's just who I was, It's just
Yeah.
like walking across the room. That's just who I was. Just what I did. And portraits were. I was always drawn to portraits, and still am sometimes. And,
Well, and you've always loved hands.
oh, hands! Yes, I'll never forget when I met a famous kite maker, a New Zealander. Sounds strange, but anyway, brilliant guy, an engineer, tiny physically, but he had the most enormous hands. They really were in proportion to the. And he used them when he was talking a great deal. And
Was he very popular?
no, typical engineer, boring, you know.
Okay.
But we were there
Apologies
because
to any engineers listening.
yeah. So and I watched him and I thought I've got to do his portrait. Those hands are amazing. So I did. I used pastels, which again was interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So when you were teaching, okay, you didn't teach art class, but you taught little, boys and girls, and you there must have been a point, in the day where they got to play with crayons or something, right?
Oh no, there was art. In fact, as a new teacher, that I remember just doing what, as you say, I thought was good. Give them materials and let the kids do their thing.
Okay.
And then I'd put them up on the wall because that's what you were supposed to do. And then one day the vice principal came in. She was a very fierce older woman, and she's looking at the walls. And I thought, oh dear, I've done something wrong. And I said, is everything all right? She said, my goodness, that work is wonderful. Each child has,
Yeah.
done their own thing. And I said, I know the other teachers in the infant department. They would give the children an outline
Right.
or stand at the front of the classroom with an outline. Okay, now you have to do this. You
Everybody
have to copy
the
this.
house
Everybody,
or whatever. Yeah.
and then those were pinned on the wall. And I just thought, oh my god, that's so boring. Those poor kids.
Well, it sounds like that was about obedience, and what you were teaching was
don't know.
creativity through freedom. Perhaps
It was so much fun. Yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm now. There's no wrong answer. I have to stress, but I'm curious about something. I'm building something to somewhere in this
Okay.
interview. Beware. Do you feel when you were teaching these 5 to 7 year olds that you were able to spot the kids with artistic promise, or was it anyone's guess until you saw what they did?
Um. Yes, I think so. The ones who really got caught up in it, and but they all enjoyed it, yeah. And then there were some that stood out when you put them on the wall, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the old routine of nature versus nurture, and how a lot of people who might have enjoyed doing art, whether or not they've tried to do it for a living,
Mhm.
they'll think, oh, well, I don't know, I wasn't a natural, I have to work at it.
Yes,
As if the
yeah.
only people who can do it are those who were touched by God or
Though
whatever.
equally, I find it annoying when people say, "Oh, I'm self-taught,"
Oh,
self-taught. I find that really annoying, yeah.
well, I'm interested. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that they haven't had any schooling or training and they just, they wing it
Yeah.
and then they think they're as good as people who put in
I
a lot
think
of
it's
work?
yeah,
Or?
I think it's good to have some guidance. You can only go so far being self-taught.
Well, it's funny because for a while I remember thinking I wod be just self-taught at writing. When I was a teenager,
Mm,
I wanted to just somehow completely reinvent everything. I remember briefly being annoyed at the concept of 3 acts.
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
everybody's got to do 3 acts. And now, I've joked on this very podcast that how do you escape that? You can divide it. You can make it 4 or 5 or 300 acts. But at the end of
Mm,
the day, there's linear time. It's going to be a beginning and a middle and an end. And you can say, well, what if I remix the order? Well, there's still a beginning and a middle and an end because that's how we experience things.
mm.
And so it's just, I wish I could travel back in time and tell teenage me to, cut it out and be okay with learning some stuff and not be obsessed with being self taught because it slowed me
Yeah.
down. I feel. I think
Oh,
I would have
you
gotten
weren't
much
very
better.
keen on poetry till you went to university,
Yeah.
and then you learnt about poetry, and
I learned to appreciate poetry.
you really
I knew
yeah
about it
changed
before.
it.
Okay, so I think that we touched upon this already, but how important is artistic expression to you? By which I mean, like, it sounds maybe precious, but honestly, if I go more than a week without doing some kind of writing, it doesn't have to be big and fancy, it doesn't have to be a lot, I can be just brainstorming, but if I go a whole 7 days where all I'm doing is working and eating, sleeping, and having fun, maybe even,
Mhm.
I start to get bummed out. I feel my mood genuinely suffer. I wonder, is that how is it like for you? Have I inherited this from you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, if you go a long ways without painting or without creating a design for jewelry, if you go many days or weeks, does it affect your mood or are you fine?
No, I would miss that terribly. Coming for this visit, we talked about going to the AGO, and it was an Andy Warhol exhibit, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure. I grew up during that era, and Warhol was just so weird. At a time when I was learning how to do life drawing and stuff, so fairly structured how you draw a figure and use a model and all that stuff. Looking back, though, I'm grateful that I had that opportunity because you can turn it more abstract if you like, but I feel sorry for women artists a bit younger than myself who didn't have that training. And again, in my teenage years, the arts and crafts movement was big, and that came into my life in a big way. William Morris and all that fabulous stuff. And in fact, they had a wonderful exhibition at the National Gallery, the arts and crafts of William Morris. I went 3 or 4 times to that, I remember. Yeah, so it was again the idea of there was always the idea. Well, when I was studying art, oh, the crafts was something else. That's not art. Real art is this.
Oh,
And
well,
I'm,
okay.
and I don't think you can be that dogmatic about it. It is what it is to you. It has to speak to you.
No, I agree. And in this, dear listener, you have just experienced a common family dynamic in the Brackenburys, where one of us asks the other one a question, and they learn a lot of very interesting things, but the question doesn't actually get answered. So that was great, Mum. But maybe my question isn't that good. I mean, that could be fair. But would you say then you're comfortable? Well, I mean, I guess I feel like you're always doing something. Always, always at the very least designing jewelry with Dad, or I think you've been painting a bit less lately. But like, does it affect your mood or not? Can you take it or leave it in terms of a long absence without doing the thing?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Just the same as not having a chance to converse with people and have a laugh. It's important. Coming from England, everything, especially the London area, everything's turned into a laugh. Often it turns into a very vulgar kind of humour. And it's fun to get to other people who understand it. It's very quick, very fast. So I find if I don't get that at least once a week,
and it's like that with art. So that's interesting to conflate those two things, because I think it's pretty fair to say you're extroverted. You get energy from people, and I definitely got that from you. That's nobody's loving the pandemic, but it's been hard for me being able to only see my partner. I love her, but she'll be the first to tell you it's
and
the
you
same
can
way.
have too much of a good thing.
Yeah, well.
I've been married for 51 years. I know all about too much of a good thing.
All right. Well, speaking of your sort of personal history, coming back to that, upon moving to Canada with Dad, you, like most immigrants, your education didn't count in the country you moved to. So, and you didn't feel like retraining to be a teacher. Good grief. So you chose to join Dad in the goldsmithing business.
Very naively on my part.
Oh.
Because we're talking mid to late 70s in Ottawa, and women were not allowed to work in workshops, goldsmithing workshops.
Right, and you became the first woman in Ontario, first woman goldsmith in Ontario, right?
In Ottawa anyway. So I went,
okay.
I don't know, maybe in Ontario. It was a very strange system, and when one organisation doesn't want outsiders to join it, they make it more difficult and obscure and aren't very helpful and stuff. Anyway, I went round to every workshop, goldsmithing workshop in Ottawa, and said, I have an art background, I've been married to a goldsmith X number of years, and I'm interested in doing an apprenticeship. And I would get, first of all, I would get a look of horror from this poor guy. A woman? A woman in the workshop? I was told that every time. A woman? I said, well, I'm married, and I dress appropriately.
Oh, God.
There'd be no boobs hanging out or anything, or tight pants, And as I said, I have been a teacher. I'm a respectable person.
I love that that's the Christine Brackenbury guarantee. No boobs out.
And then someone said to me, there's a new workshop opening up, a South African guy. Why did you try him? Canadians obviously just can't get their head around this. Try a South African.
Yeah, get someone nice and progressive, a guy from an apartheid nation. Yeah.
And he had a very strong accent. I had trouble understanding him.
Right.
Anyhow, so I had to read the visual, the clues when I said to him what my ambition was. He looked embarrassed, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because embarrassed in a nice way. He said, I've never worked with a woman before. I've never worked anywhere there's been a woman before. And then again, I was selling myself. And he said, tell you what, he said, let's give it a try. And if the guys aren't too upset by it, and you don't disturb the workday too much, then you can stay. So that's how I started my 4-year apprenticeship. However, 2 years after it started, there was a downturn in the economy. There's always a downturn in the economy. It cycles, you know. And well, he had to lay somebody off because, you know, there wasn't enough money being made to keep everybody paying that. So who had to go? Well, the woman, of course. You can't sack a man and leave a woman in the... Anyway, so again, I was a bit downhearted, but fortunately, I heard about an Austrian chap further outside of Ottawa, and we were planning on moving out of Ottawa, my husband and I. So I thought I'll go and interview with him, and he was so ordinary to my mind, and he had worked with women in Austria before, and I told him the story, and he said, I don't know what's wrong with Canadians. That's crazy, isn't it? So he took me on. However, he had overlooked the fact that the two other guys in his workshop were both French Canadian, one from France and one from Quebec. And the one from Quebec had never seen a woman in the workshop before.
Right.
And his wife was put off by the fact that there was this young woman working with him every day. And she came in to make sure I wasn't wearing a skirt too short or some such nonsense. I'll never forget that.
I have a question. I mean, I'm loving all these details.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. I'm loving all these details, but I have a question. Was it at one of these workshops, or was it where you trained that the magazine story happened?
Magazine story?
Yes. Remember there was somewhere you were working or training, I can't remember which, and guys were leaving Playboy magazine all over the break room table.
That was the other one, yeah.
So that was this...
to put me off, yeah.
Yeah, and can you tell our listener what you did?
I was trying to remember. It was crazy. Yeah, these guys thought that they would get rid of me by leaving these... Oh, they only had a half-hour lunch break. That was it. And they sit around this big table, and there's nothing... They don't want to talk. Guys don't want to talk. So there were big piles of girly magazines, we used to call it back then. What were they? Penthouse or something?
Playboy, Penthouse,
and they just sit there flipping them through them. And there's me sitting there, a woman, as they're looking at these fake boobs and everything. And I thought, oh, my goodness. So one day... there was a new magazine that had come out. That's right. We were up on Spark Street, and there was, I think it was a Coles bookstore or something, a soul magazine. And it was an embarrassing thing for me to do again as a woman. But I thought, I'm going to go and buy one of those new magazines that showed lots of naked men. It was a sort of feminist thing, I think, a backlash. I don't know.
Well, we're just trying to expand the market.
Yeah.
I think it was Playgirl.
Playgirl, that was it, Playgirl. And I had to line up for the cash, holding this wretched magazine. I thought, oh my God, I hope I don't see anybody I know. What's that married woman buying that? Anyway, so I bought this magazine, and then when the guys weren't looking, I sneaked it into halfway down one of these piles. And then we're looking at usual thing every lunch hour. They're flipping through the magazines, and the guy, well, actually was the biggest guy in the room, funnily enough, great tall guy. And he found this. He reached and he found this. He said, "What's this?" And he looked at it, and who put this here? And then suddenly they all looked at me. There's half a dozen guys. Did you put this here? I thought, I don't know. I don't know how it got there. I said, one of those new magazines. I don't know. So, and they're looking through, and I could see they were reacting as women do when guys look at these immaculate women. You know, they feel diminished, and the guys were getting more and more depressed looking. And then when they got to the centerfold, my God, look at the size of that guy's dick. I've never forgotten that. And by then the boss, of course, heard all this noise going on and came to see what all the fuss was about. And I thought, that's it, I'm going to get sacked, but I don't care. I'm fed up with these guys. And anyway, he took me waved his finger at me to come and talk to him. And I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to get sacked, you know. And he said, did you bring that magazine? I said, I'm afraid so. I'm just tired. He said, well done. So he praised me for standing up to them.
I've always loved that story. I really wanted to share it. And, you know, speaking of gender in the workplace, when eventually, of course, of course to me, you and Dad wound up working together as your own business. And that's been the case as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
And I've obviously been pretty close to the subject here, right? So I wonder if this is a silly idea I got in my head somewhere along the way, or if it is accurate, because it's kind of gendered. in the sense, I always thought of, both of you had craft and skill, obviously, but Dad was a bit more of the kind of draftsman, the technical minded designer, and you were more the creative, artistic designer. You brought that energy into what you
Yeah,
guys
so we
did.
work as a team. We always have done. Yeah.
Okay, would you say that sort of, each of your strengths, I
Oh,
described
for
them kind
sure.
of fairly?
And he was very grateful I was able to help him with his drawing skills because, again, that was one of my strengths. Because when he did custom work for a customer, even now, he can actually draw exactly what he's talking about, And but again, it's a two-way street. If the customer has no imagination whatsoever, then that will be added to the challenge. It's not till you actually make the ring they find, oh, that's what you were talking about. Oh my God, I drew it for you from every angle.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's kind of cool. I mean, you guys not only lived together, raised a kid together, uh, you still live together, and worked together, but it's fair to say you created
Mhm.
together.
Yeah, and still do. We talk
Yeah.
about things and yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm saying things in past tense because I'm looking at the past, but yes,
Yes.
you still do all these things.
Sure.
Except raise me. I'd like to think that's over. So, okay, all right. So coming away from talking about you guys, let's talk about me for a second. I'm an only child. I get to talk this way. What exactly did it feel like for you when it became clear I was going to seriously try to make writing what I do for a living? Because it must have given you joy to see me be a little creative so-and-so and to have people react positively to that. But when a kid says, I want to try and make a living at something that's notoriously difficult to make a living at, how does that make you feel as a parent?
I guess I think back to my parent. As a parent, you do what you think is best. Um, and really, if you're blessed with any kind of creativity, whatever arts it is, writing or music or whatever it is, that'll always be with you. It'll never go away, and you can whatever challenge comes in life, that will help you. I don't see it as a distraction at all, and to say it, my father thought teaching, and I remember my uncles, and all wonderful, all were teaching, you're made for life now. And by the end of the 5 years that I taught, things had gone topsy-turvy as they do, and suddenly teachers weren't respected anymore. There was government interference, and suddenly the male teachers wanted to be separated union-wise from the female, and all that was nonsense was going on. And then another government decided they needed to send inspectors into the school to make sure the teachers are doing their jobs properly. And then the school, you as a teacher would have spent, they knew they were coming at the end of the year. That was, dreadful thing to do. People were coming to check up on you. A bit like the old fashioned, wait till your father gets home. If you don't behave today.
Well, okay, but teaching, I mean, aside from there was a bit of a gender in the times thing. That was one of the 5 jobs or whatever that was considered, for women, especially from people of your granddad's generation. But also, for all that teaching sadly became a profession that was not respected, and I don't know if that's ever recovered.
No.
At least at the time you were doing it, it was a steady paycheck, was it not? I mean, you knew you could make a living. You knew.
Well, that was partly the problem. It wasn't very well paid. What you earned was that position in society, really. And as the unions got more involved and was trying to raise the teachers' income, that's what it all got in the.
Okay, so when I briefly thought about going into marketing. I did a co-op.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, that's another story. I remember thinking that would be a way to get paid to be creative, and almost immediately they made it clear that like 0.5% of people involved in marketing get to actually be creative.
That's right.
And even then, it's within tremendous constraints to produce little 30-second blibbits or whatever.
Yes.
And so that turned me off, and I sort of was fumbling and just kind of went, well, somehow or another writing. I didn't really settle on screenwriting as the main push until I was a little older. I was 19. And I guess part of what made me ask this question was, you maybe forget this, but you guys are very supportive. And honestly, overall, I would say, I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me. I mean, people are going to hear this. I got really lucky, I think. You guys are very loving and supporting raising me. And honestly, it would have been nice if you were rich, if you could have done that for me. But otherwise, I would say I really lucked out. And the more I learn about other people's parents on average, the luckier I feel as the years pass by. So don't think I'm having a go when I mention this, but I have not forgotten that you eventually, years after I was 19, revealed that part of why you paid for the screenwriting summer course I took
Mhm.
was because you hoped it would turn me off the
Oh,
idea.
I'd forgotten that. That's right. Yeah,
You hoped I would take that course and go, "Ugh," and then maybe, I don't know, go be a doctor or whatever, like something
Well,
else.
I've always loved reading, and I ended up belonging to 2 book clubs, which is crazy in Canada. And, one of the, older ladies in a book club, she, bless her, she lovely, lovely woman. She was very impressed with Oliver and his writing and stuff, and I thought, "Oh, yeah, that's all very well," you know? And she said, "Tell you what," she said, "I hear there's a screenwriting course available in Ottawa. Oliver's a little bit young. I'm not sure if they'll accept him, but anyway, so we had to apply and I guess pay for it and that. But I thought he'll learn how hard it is and boring it is, and that'll be the end of that idea. That was my idea going into that. So, but of course, what has always happened with Oliver, he talked and talked and talked, and the screenwriter loved his writing. And at the end of the week or whatever it was, she said, she asked Oliver, could she take his writing with her? She wanted to look at it some more, which only encouraged and validated his plan.
God damn it.
And my girlfriend from the book club was thrilled. And we had a joke. It's all your fault, Anne. Look what you've done. I thought it was going to do. Oh,
Well,
yeah, it
well,
was
well, there
fun.
you go. So, I mean, again, I'm just exploring it. I'm having a go. But
And this
you,
was a professional screenwriter that was
yeah,
showing
yeah.
him
No, I
approval.
still remember Sharon Buckingham. Yeah,
Oh, that's the name.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But so there you go. So you obviously had this feeling that maybe it'd be better if I didn't do it.
Yeah, I was doing my dad, wasn't I? Yes, yeah.
Well, that's okay, but
Yeah.
I'm curious. So, was that just concern for me making money? Was that concern for prestige? Was that concern for me making the money necessary to do things like, get a house and have grandkids and all that good stuff that you would
But
fairly want?
parents just want you to be secure, whatever that takes. Yeah, as you say, it's certainly not easy.
Well, Dad's not here. We can say whatever we want. Did Dad have feelings along those lines of Jesus? He should do something else. What was Dad's feelings, if you remember that, when I was a teenager?
Well, your dad wasn't a big reader. That wasn't his thing. Words weren't his thing. But he kind of left it up to me, I guess. He thought I had authority as the ex-teacher.
Oh, okay.
There was that element to it.
But he
I
had
guess.
must have had an opinion. Did he never share it?
When he chose to be a goldsmith, his father didn't really approve of that.
Right.
Well, who the hell does that kind of a job? And again, it was arduous. He had to travel up to London on the train, and they paid him pennies. And depending on which company you got a job at, and whether you had any prestige. And he struggled and struggled and struggled. So he knew that if that's really what you wanted to do, you'd have to put up the fight. And I guess he felt you were man enough to do that.
Sure. Yeah, very, very muscular profession
Yes,
involving
yes.
lots of jumping jacks and big muscles. Okay, because the only thing I remember him saying to me was when I sort of, I don't think I decided on screenwriting yet, but I was in my teens and I knew writing. Yeah, this is the thing. He said to me, "Well, Oliver, I have been sitting down to make a living at the workbench,
Oh, yeah.
for all these years." And if you're writing, you sit down. And I went, yeah, I mean, you can. Usually you do, yeah. He said, okay, well, just be careful of not eating too much and getting exercise because otherwise this will happen. And he grabbed his stomach from all the years of sitting at the bench. That was his bigger piece of advice. And the funny thing is, it really stuck with me. So, okay, good work, Dad. But that is the only thing I really remember. I'm sure he said some nice, encouraging statements, but as far as anything really specific.
Mm-hmm.
And he never said anything to me about doubts or anything, bless him. But, that's what you say and what you say to yourself. Or, obviously it can be different.
Yeah.
So I guess I just wonder because this last year, I haven't been having a lot of fun, like most people, again, pandemic. But also, I guess, especially in the last few months, I've been feeling particularly a bit crushed with the writing thing. And there are points where I look around and think, geez, it's almost like by doing this, I've upset a natural order or something. I mean, I don't want to get into the details, but you guys have ended up having to help me out a little bit here and there. And you guys aren't rich. And listener, I'm not talking about big privilege with a capital P. I mean, I've always paid my own rent, but But there have been points where I've been a little tight, or I've been able to get something, and that just doesn't feel right. And it's felt less right, each time it's happened, because all I want to do is have enough money to turn around and pay for a cleaning lady to come by your house once a month, or to buy a house with room that I can, have you guys in, rather than sort of undoing a futon in my office in this apartment that I desperately want to move out of. And the kid thing up, and there's other reasons to want kids or not want kids. But I feel like if I'd had more money, maybe I would have decided to do it and decided to do it sooner. So there's this feeling of almost like I'm robbing my parents of certain things by prioritizing me and my big, stupid artistic pursuit. And yet, if I go more than 6 days without doing it, I start to feel bad. And yet, how do you ignore the fact that growing up, you guys were very kind and encouraged me. My teachers were all very kind and encouraged me. You have at least a few stories of taking little me to talks given by writers of the books I was reading.
Oh, there's that wonderful author from down east. He lived down in Nova Scotia, I think. Children's author.
Martin Godfrey?
Well done, Martin Godfrey, yeah. And he was in town in Ottawa, and he's going to be at the Ottawa Library presenting his book, as you do, and he obviously wants to sell books. And a big crowd turned out. He was very popular back then. And I said to Oliver, would you like? Oh, yes. So I was careful to make sure Oliver was sitting in the middle, because he always loved to engage with whatever was going on. And so Martin Godfrey started talking about his book, and Oliver kept putting his hand up. And I tried to hold his arm down, but he was so excited. And in the end, Martin Godfrey stopped. He said, okay, let's just stop this for a moment. He said, I want you to know, see that little boy down there who keeps asking questions? And everybody looked back. Yeah. Stand up, he said. And Oliver stood up, a bit shy. Didn't want people looking at him. And Oliver, he said, what's your name? He said, Oliver. And Martin Godfrey said, well, tell everybody that you've never met me before and you don't know me. Is that true? Yes, said Oliver. I've never met you before. But why do you keep putting your hand up and talking about my books in such great detail? Oliver said, well, I've read all of them, and now you've written another one, and I'm very excited to read it. And the whole room erupted into laughter. He said, well, I guess that sold all the books I brought with me today. There was just no getting away from it. And I don't think Oliver realised what he was doing to help this author. It was such fun. And actually, Oliver did write, he was home from school, I remember, and I said, why don't you write to that author of you and tell him how you like his books? And anyway, the letter went on and on about the details, and then we got a response back, I remember, from Martin Godfrey saying, how old is this kid? You want to know how old Oliver was? So he was blown away. That was fun. Fun.
Yeah, and okay, all right. I was very precocious and delightful. Thank you.
Yeah. But you gave that writer validation.
Well, yeah, and I guess experiences like that, and all the encouragement and all that stuff, and how much pleasure I took from it, and it gave me. How do you not try and make that what you do all the time? I know lots of people work full-time jobs and write, and some of them are very successful as authors. I mean, it's not just the hobbyists, as if that's bad, by the way. It's not. Yeah. It's absolutely not. So, yeah, I guess I just think about the sacrifices I've made to try and free up the disgusting amounts of time it is to try and be your best at things like writing and screenwriting and so on. And I guess I don't know. Maybe I don't have a point here, but I guess I'm reverse engineering my feelings of maybe I've not given you and Dad things that you maybe would have wanted me to have or me to bring into your lives because of writing, and then work backwards from that feeling that I've had this year to me being a teenager, and what was in your heads when it became clear I was going down that path.
Oh, I think we always knew you were going to be a writer. That was it.
Are you sure, or is that a story that's become very seductive to tell yourself in later years?
No, that you always had that writer in you. That's who you were. Unless we went at you with a big sword and chopped you in half, and
well, then I'd be dead.
Sewed you together again, back to front and upside down.
Then I'd be really ugly and dead.
There would be a different Oliver.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, very. Yeah. No, that's true. That would change me. Okay, so all right. Meanwhile, you wrote a short book.
Oh, yes.
Can you please tell people what it was about and why you chose to write it when you did?
My two older sisters, who I mentioned earlier, poor things, got sick with different things and died early 60s, in their 60s. And around the same time, two or three of my nieces were having a tough time with their marriages and kids and everything. It was just a lousy time, really. And I thought, well, I'm next. I'm number 3. The top 2 have gone. I better do something that I've been saying I was going to do for a lot, like we all do. Oh, one day I'll write that one day. I'll put that together. My father had given me half a dozen artifacts, I guess you'd call them, from what he did and experienced during the Second World War. And he had a lovely approach to it. He had a wonderful approach. He didn't ever want to write the book himself, he told me, because he never wanted to glorify war. Mm-hmm. That was his big thing. So I thought, well, now's the time to do it. And thank God I had this writer's son living in Toronto and another lovely young nephew who was living in London, England at the time, working in around the printing industry.
Yeah, Xerox.
And of course, I'm not that good on the computers, but he was tremendous. And he said, I've noticed this. Gosh, this story can go on too long. Sorry about it. Anyway, he put me in contact with an American professor, university professor. He said, this chap's been writing articles and that, and he mentioned something. I'm sure there's a connection with Granddad, said my nephew. So that was a start. And as I say, I remember growing up, I had health issues and was in a lot of pain very often. And my father would tell me some of these stories to take my mind off, as stories do, take your mind away from any worries or concerns, pain you have. And also to tell me that, it doesn't matter how bad life can be, how much pain you're suffering, good will eventually come out of it. And it took me it blew me away. It took me 2 years to research it, get information from the British Royal Navy. My father was in the Royal Navy. I had to pay £30 sterling to get this information and show my birth certificate to say I was a next of kin. I couldn't believe the detail they wanted.
And the best part was the information you ended up getting was just like his height, complexion.
Yes. In order to get into the Royal Navy, this is the beginning of the war and they needed men. But anyway, I got his chest measurement as he was then and his height. But the detail I loved the most was his complexion. I said, was he spotty? I was like, no, he was fair. He had a fair complexion.
And I love all this because I ended up helping you with layout. I did the layout. Mm-hmm. I helped to look for typos, obviously.
Yes.
And I remember more than once I had to help you fight something that I have to fight in myself. You are impatient.
Oh.
And you didn't care about putting the dates for things. You're trying to tell this a short historical novel or nonfiction book about Granddad's war experiences, and you were like, oh, I don't know, it was somewhere in World War II. And you're leaving out a detail. A big part why you wanted to write this was so that his great grandchildren could know him.
Yes.
Because they didn't. They were born mostly after he died.
That's right. And the title, I couldn't think of a title to give it. That was another fun thing. I was always carrying these papers around with me. I was writing down things and changing things. And I was sitting on the bus, traveling home, having visited Oliver in Toronto, going home to Ottawa. And this lovely young French-Canadian girl was sitting next to me. And she said, do you mind me asking what you're doing? I said, I'm trying to finish this goddamn book. I have 2 years and I can't think what title to give it. Anyway, I explained, my father's approach to life and good will always come out of things. Oh, she said, I have the perfect translation. And most of this is set in France, you said. Yes, I said it was set in France. So she said, and I have to hold it because I can't remember it. Chanceuse dans sa malchance. In English, that says, lucky in his misfortune. So bad things happen, but good can come out of them. And one of the artifacts that Dad gave me was this 6-page letter from this sound. I never met her, of course. Lovely woman in northern France. And she wrote this letter at the end of the war. Or the date tells you when it was. And to my father, my dear James, that was his father. And she's hoping that his wife and his new baby was well. And if he ever comes back to France, hopes he will come to visit. And she said, well, by then maybe we'll have a roof on the house, because this is Normandy and everywhere was wrecked. You know, the Nazis had left, but they'd left this wrecked place and stuff. Lovely, lovely letter, but language changes. It doesn't stay the same, and there's some very old French in there. My French isn't good enough to do the translation, so I asked a dear friend of mine who lives where I live, and she's very well educated, Quebec French, and she's taught French in high schools and stuff, and she said, I'll translate it for you if you like, Christine. I said, oh, that would be lovely. Would you, Constance? That would be wonderful. Oh, yeah, no problem. 6 pages. I know, never mind. And shortly after that, the American, as I called him, contacted me and said, I got somebody who could help you with that letter translate. Oh, no, that's fine. My friend's done it. He said, I'll tell him about it. And next thing I know, another email came, this time from this man with a French name. And I didn't know him or what he did. And he said, would you like me to translate that letter properly? And I thought, those Americans, they're so full of themselves. They always say Canadians can't do things properly.
Well, we're always snobs about them, and we really have no right to be. We have no right to be.
I know, it's this silliness that goes on. Anyway, I turned down the offer. And then a few months went by, and information still flying. And I discovered, much to my embarrassment and horror, that this chap was head of French translation for the United Nations.
Well, so this is one thing I really loved, was it wasn't just that you got to experience trying to write a book,
yes,
in the sense of, you know, the writing and crafting narrative. You got to experience how all books are collaborative.
Yes.
It's kind of a cliche to say this, but, you know, most people who don't think too hard about it, and everybody has to, obviously.
It's a huge community.
Yeah, you think it's just one person beavering away and maybe they get an editor to look at it. But inevitably stuff like this happens, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, I think.
Yeah.
And I was really happy that you had that experience, and it was fun to help you with it. And now you have this little artifact, and you had never had any intention of professional publication.
Oh God,
this wasn't for the public.
No,
this was a really lovely little artifact for the family.
Yes, and the youngsters loved it, you know, and cousins. A cousin in Australia said, "I always knew there was something special about Uncle Jim. I had no idea because he never talked about it, you know."
Yeah. Well, that was, I think, something about it that's very romantic. Is the telling of this writing of this book really appeals to me because of your chronic ear issues, laying in bed in pain when you were little, you got to be the keeper of the stories because, as you say, he wound up sharing stories with you. He didn't tell anybody else.
No.
You know?
No, look, I did this, or so and so did this, and
what stories? I mean, I won't get into all of them right now, guys, but any one of them could have been a movie.
Yes,
there was at least a half dozen. I remember when I was going through the research with you, I thought, good grief, you know.
And it was interesting again, the time that the feminism was becoming a thing then, in the 60s and 70s, and I discovered one of my sisters, how she came by her name, this young French woman who rescued my father and 2 other guys who'd been captured and were on the train. Traveling
she
through
was like
France.
19 or something, right?
Less than that. Yeah, he was traveling on this train through France, being sent to a prisoner of war camp. You know, that's it. You know, that's it for you.
You're done. Yeah.
And she, my father, again, he was a commando, a train commando, and he knew how to fight dirty.
Yeah.
And when the train stopped at a crossing or something, he and these 2 other guys overcame the guard and got off the train. The word got out to the resistance people, and they, oh my goodness, we better pick those guys up quick before the Germans get them again. And this girl, as I say, I just loved the story because back then you talked about girl power, and this was a girl power story. She went to the German headquarters in town, and there was a Jeep or whatever vehicle it was called back then, an army vehicle. And the Germans were so sure of themselves, they'd even left the key in the thing, you know, and the French are sissies, you know. And anyway, this girl walked up and nobody took any notice because we know what can a girl do, kind of thing. Anyway, she jumped into this vehicle, started up, and off she went. Drove all over town, all around the woods and that to save my dad and these 2. Her name was Rose. I've never forgot that story. And that's how your sister got named by her name. We named her after that, which I loved. I loved the girl power, of course.
Yeah, sure.
He only had daughters. I often wondered what it would have been like if he'd had a son, but so he was very supportive of feminism before it was even a thing, really. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I only knew him a little bit, but everything I got from James, James Coles, was that he was a very gentle, kind man.
Yeah, he
And
loved
I think
books.
he would have. I think, in a
Yeah.
way, if someone had to have 5 daughters, he was a good man to help raise them. Is the feeling I got. Not that he would have
Yes.
been bad with sons, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it was a big family, extended family there in England. And I had an older male cousin who didn't approve of me writing these stories because, a woman, again, a woman writing about the war. I should be the one to write that. He felt that he should be the one to write that book.
But he never did. And isn't he dead now?
I just heard he just died.
Well, tough shit.
Poor John.
If you want to write a book, the good thing to do is to do it before you die. Anyway, whatever. I may sound unsympathetic, but he was mean to my mum. Okay. Dad. Let's bring it back to the men. Dad is writing a book in theory. Could you briefly tell us about that and how you feel about it?
Well, after 51 years of marriage, you learn to manipulate your husband. It's like a small 2-year-old, really. If you want them to eat the greens on the plate, then you say, well, if you eat those, you can have that big plate of ice cream. Anyhow, Oliver helped his dad write, because Dad wanted to document his world.
He's my dad. You say Eric.
Oh, sorry, Eric, yeah. Eric, my husband, wanted to document his life in London, England, doing his apprenticeship back in the day. He had 5 years as an apprentice and 3 years as a journeyman. That world apparently no longer exists. And of course, those companies don't exist. And it was a very, very arduous journey for him. But he was very determined. And so that's how he became. But back then, they called them diamond mounters for some reason. And I remember when he and I were married, he decided we would go across to the rest of Europe it was a surprise for me. Honeymoon up in Liechtenstein. Anyway, I didn't know about that. But anyway, we almost lost that opportunity. The guards who, what do you call it? You have to show your documentation.
Immigration officer.
Yeah, anyway, he looked at your father's passport, and very foolishly, he'd written Diamond Mounter because he was very proud. He'd worked hard to get that title, Diamond Mounter. But this chap thought that we were smuggling diamonds.
Yeah, because you would write that, I'm smuggling diamonds on the paperwork. But it's always been that stupid. I think about when Dan came over, and it was before 9/11, but not much.
Yeah.
And he had to literally answer the question, are you a terrorist, yes or no?
Yes, he came in via New York.
Yeah. I mean, good grief, right? So, sorry, I don't want to get too lost in that in Dad's story. I was thinking more of the fact that now all 3 of us will have at least tried to write a book. We'll see if Dad finishes.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
so he's been writing it, but because his son's a writer, he's kind of in awe of him. Oliver doesn't realise this. So Eric's trying to write it very precisely, and the English and the spelling has to be correct. But then he forgets and he gets carried away in his story. And then I look at it and no, that third word's spelt wrong. No, that sentence is incorrect. No, Oliver will be all over that. No. So it's kind of slowed things down a bit.
Well, I try not to be too hard on him about the technical
know.
stuff because it's a first draft. God, who cares, really?
Yeah.
You do your best, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's not the high priority. It's getting the story down, I think. The other thing, though, is I know Dad feels very self-conscious about it.
Yes.
Because he stopped what we would think of as traditional schooling at 14?
No.
15?
15 back then.
15,
yeah.
okay. Well, still,
Yeah.
15. That was his last time he had an English class.
Mhm.
And as you say, until much more recent years, where I don't know what light switch went off in his head, and he became a big reader all of a sudden, he never was one. Not in the time I knew him growing up. I never saw him read motorcycle magazines and kite magazines.
Of course, yeah.
And manuals for motorcycles and assembling kites. So it's been this really cool thing where we've connected over it.
Yes.
And I've loved to help him. But it reached a point in the spring where I just stopped bugging him about it because Dad loves to start things as you know.
Yes.
And then it becomes this job to keep him doing them until they're done, unless
Yes,
it's like,
yeah,
you know, his
yeah.
absolute number one hobby. And I honestly had given up on him finishing this bloody book, but you were just telling me this morning over breakfast that he's actually been working on it.
Yes, yes, and he's been getting a nudge from two middle-aged men, I guess they are now, whose fathers knew your father, Oliver, way back in the day, and their fathers have passed away.
Yeah.
And these young men it's kind of sad in a way. They're reaching out. Eric's still alive. We can see him on the internet. Oh, look at his work, you know. And one of them actually is a whatever they call them in England now, goldsmith. I don't know,
Goldsmith.
jeweler. I don't know. And seem to want to make a connection with him. So I use that as mothers do.
Yeah.
See, if you finish the book, those guys will be thrilled.
Yeah.
You'll be able to send them a copy, you know.
Never mind that. I made it very clear to him. One of the biggest reasons I encouraged him to write this thing was because it would make me very happy.
Mhm.
Because Dad didn't tell me a hell of a lot about himself growing up. I got one or two funny stories, but for the most part, he just went bloop and came into existence the day he married you.
Mm-hmm.
I saw maybe one photo of him before the wedding photo.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to me, it was this thing of, oh, come on, Dad, write this damn thing so I can know you more and I mean, it sounds morbid, but remember you better.
For
you know,
sure,
in the
yeah. Once
future.
they're gone, they're gone. That's it. Yeah.
So yes, it's a crazy thing. So it's kind of interesting, I think, that, you know, here's me. I'm only writing silly fiction stories. You and Dad both, you've written and he's writing and hopefully finishing non-fiction, biographical kind of stories to help family connect. I just think that's very beautiful what you and Dad are doing. Dad would like to try and get it published. I know. We've talked about it. Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is, I know at least one editor who's I've told about it, and they go, "Oh, I'd edit the hell out of that." You know, I'd be very interested. Yeah, it's a neat narrative.
There you go.
Because it's not just about his personal journey, but that's, as I told him, he kind of wanted to map that to the changing culture in London. Because in the time when he was little and just starting the schooling to when he left for Canada, England transformed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it went from, you know, Churchill to just about 10 minutes before Thatcher.
Maggie Thatcher.
And then we all know how everything came tumbling down with her and everything after that. So, you know, it's a really neat story, but God, he's got to finish it. And every time I phone, I say, Dad, what you doing this weekend? And I'm hoping he'll say some writing. Oh, well, I'm going into the woods to move some rocks and bits of wood around so me and my friends can ride motorcycles over them. Oh, it drives me crazy. But I mean, I guess I drove him crazy a bit growing up, so it's all fair. I mean, we can talk forever. We know this from ample testing over the years, but this is getting close to the hour mark.
Okay.
So I just would say, I mean, are there any questions, anything at all that you have for me?
For you. Any questions? Oh, my gosh.
You know, about, well, I mean, to narrow it down a bit, about writing and creativity, about maybe the future of.
Well, would you please write down all the things that you're doing? Because it's never one thing and it's never one genre. Because whenever I leave the house, people ask, what's Oliver doing? And I'm looking at them and I think, who are you? Well, my wife used to teach him in grade 5. And you remember me? Well, I remember Oliver. What's he doing? I can tell my wife what he's doing. So I think he's doing some screenwriting. No, maybe not. No, the COVID has killed all that. No, I think he's writing a novel. Oh, really? Oh, I love science fiction. What's it called? So that's what I would ask of you. Please write down just slightly detailed titles and worlds.
The best part is, it's been a while, but I think I have done one or two of these fact sheets for you.
Oh, dear.
I guess I need to do a new one.
I've got to pin the mask to the fact so that I don't leave the house without it. That's another thing, of course, isn't it? My postbox key for the post office to get my letters. I have to make sure I got that and I can get back into the house.
Yes. Thank you for explaining why you need your keys. That's very good of you.
Attached to that must be this list.
All right.
Because as an Oliver magnet
God.
lurking in the air. There's Oliver's mother.
Well, it is also just kind of polite. I mean, that's what you ask people. What's your kid up
they
to?
really want to know. Remember your book launch? Oh my goodness!
Yeah, no, it's true. That book,
many
the
people
launch for the
turned up.
first book was wonderful. That was the one in Carp. That was
Yes.
nice.
All kinds of people that don't even like people, can't stand crowds, and there they were.
Yeah, I won't name names, but there was someone I'd literally never seen smile, and they were
Yes.
smiling the whole time,
Yeah.
and it was almost unnerving.
That was quite an education, a book launch. Actually being involved in a book launch. As I say, we've been to Martin Godfrey's book launch all those years ago.
Yeah, another
but it's not the same as actually
being at the centre of it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, enough talking.
Anyway, yeah, we can talk forever, as I'm sure you listening can imagine. But I hope this has been entertaining and intriguing. Now you know me a little better, I suppose, and where I come from. And I hope Mum's insights about creativity in her life and that side of things are interesting. And I hope we didn't bore you with our horrible, boring lives. I don't know. What is my point? Let's stop talking. Say goodbye to the nice people, Mum.
Oh, goodbye, nice people.
Goodbye, nice people. So I'm writing a novel. Features original music by Gloria Guns and is hosted by yours truly, Oliver Brackenbury. If you'd like to submit a question, then please email it to soimwritinganovel@gmail.com. Bonus points if you record yourself and send me an MP3 I can cut into the show. Doesn't have to be fancy, using your phone is fine, just keep it clear and concise. You can also holler at the show on Twitter. Look for @so_writing. That's @so_writing. Please consider sharing the show with anybody who might like it, leaving a review on iTunes, and checking out patreon.com/soimwritinganovel. Patrons get to be thanked in the final novel, listen to episodes of the podcast a week early, and even enjoy a bonus podcast called So I Wrote a Novel, where I read and comment on chapters of previous works, starting with my first novel, Junkyard Leopard. Thanks for hanging out with me and my mum, and I'll see you soon.